It is a beautiful day here in central Indiana, and I am so glad that we're finally getting a break from all of the high temperatures that we have been experiencing in the last couple of weeks. Some of my annual plants that I have in this no-dig flower bed are definitely suffering, and some others are just thriving. With temperatures in the mid and upper 90s for continuous days, I have been here every other day watering and trimming and just trying to keep these plants as happy as I can possibly get them to be, making sure that they have water and hoping and crossing my fingers that they make it through these really crazy temperatures. I also make sure to have plenty of clean, fresh water for the birds and the pollinators, and I am so glad that I have small little areas here and there with water for all of my garden friends. This bird bath right here that I'm showing you is a simple bowl from Home Goods and some garden rags that I found, and the birds are loving all of the extra water that I have for them. Without a doubt, my nasturtiums are the ones that are struggling the most with all of this heat. This is one dahlia tuber that I have in this container, and my dahlias are just thriving right now. In one of my past videos, I show you that I fertilize my annuals with a liquid fertilizer from Dr. Earth's that they sent me last year as a kit, and I use that fertilizer to give my dahlias a dose. So far, I have fertilized them just once. I am terrible about fertilizing my annuals, but this week, hopefully with the temperatures in the 80s, I am going to be able to take care of them a little bit better. But so far, they are doing just amazing. I haven't given these boxwoods, these baby boxwoods, any fertilizer at all this year. But I am getting ready to do some pruning on another mature hedge, and these ones are also going to get some fertilizer as well. And the fertilizer that I'm going to be using for my boxwoods and really any other perennials is Planktone. I can find it locally, I can find it in huge bags, which it also helps, and it's what's working for me right now, so I don't really bother trying to get different types of fertilizer. As long as I get a well-balanced fertilizer, that's what my perennials and shrubs get. The variegated honeysuckle that I planted here early in the spring is also doing really well. I make sure to give it extra water whenever I am giving my annuals a lot of water, because it did mention on the description of the tag that this plant likes moisture, and I've been definitely giving it a little bit of extra water here and there. It is already getting close to reach the top of this trellis that my husband built, and I am not sure if it's going to bloom this year. I don't see any buds right now forming, but it is thriving and it's growing, and if not this year, definitely next year I am hoping to see some blooms. Last year, my dahlias in the ground in this flower bed did not do so well. I am not exactly sure why. It was a new bed, so I blame it on the soil not being ready for all of my flowers. But this year, the dahlias that I have in the ground as well as in containers in this flower bed that faces the west side of the house are absolutely gorgeous. They are definitely bigger in size compared to the ones in containers, and that is expected, but they are full of buds, and so far only one of them is blooming. They are all three different types of dahlias, and this Milena dahlia that I'm showing you right here is probably one of my favorites so far. I mentioned that my nasturtiums are struggling, and the ones in the ground that I have in this flower bed are doing slightly better than the ones in the containers. I am making a mental note for next year that if I put any nasturtiums in this side of the house next year, they're definitely going to have to be in the ground instead of having a bunch of them in containers. I am growing a few different types of nasturtiums this year in my garden, but one of the varieties that is just so gorgeous in my opinion is this variegated type. This nasturtium is called Out of Africa, and depending on the plant, it will bloom a orange neon looking color or a beautiful buttery yellow color. But honestly, as I mentioned before, when I was starting to grow this indoors and I realized the beauty of the leaves, I will not mind if I don't get any blooms from these nasturtiums because the foliage itself is just gorgeous. This is my first year growing geraniums, and also it is my first time growing them from seed, and so far they have proved to be a really easy to grow hardy annual in my short experience, and I think that I am definitely going to be repeating those next year. The blooms are a little bit more on the pink side. The color was supposed to be a more peach salmon color, but it's on the pink side and it is definitely okay. I'll just know what to expect next year, and I don't know if they are going to grow much bigger. I gave them a little bit of space in between them because I wasn't sure how big they were going to grow, but this is the first year that I'm growing them, and if they don't grow that much next year, I'll know to put them slightly closer together. The amaranth that I have growing here on this side of the house is probably one of the best amaranths that I have ever grown. This is my second year, and last year I had red spike growing in this flower bed, and it took a little bit for that type of amaranth to get to where this one is right now. This amaranth is just absolutely gorgeous. There is something eating the leaves, and like I mentioned before, I don't really spray for anything. I don't try to kill anything in my garden. I consider my garden to be a living garden full of little creatures, and we all gotta eat, right? So I just let them be. If the amaranth is the only plant that they are attacking right now, then that's fine. The blooms are just spectacular on this one, and I am so very happy with how it's growing so far. I hope that that amaranth keeps getting fuller and wider and spreading around, because that container that I have there is struggling hard, you guys. In one of my past videos, I show you how I put together all of this flower bed, but these are the nasturtiums that I have in this container. I have a dahlia that is really tiny. It's not growing at all, and my nasturtiums are just so trashed by the heat. I might just start over and maybe find another plant that is already big, or switch my container that I have there, because these plants right here are definitely struggling really bad. So do you still think I have a green thumb? There is no such thing as a green thumb or brown thumb in my experience. The knowledge that you get from growing plants years after years is what gives you that knowledge of treating plants better for the upcoming years, knowing how plants react in certain sides of your home, in certain areas, in containers versus in ground. And that is something that every garden struggles year after years. It does not matter how many years you have been gardening, you're still going to struggle with something on a certain year, and it never ends. And that's the beauty of gardening. The cannas that I started from seeds that I collected last year actually are doing okay. They're not as tall as they used to be. I think that being in that little corner with the heat, with maybe even the amaranth shading them a little bit more than I wanted them to be, is definitely keeping them from being as huge and amazing that they normally are. And that is completely fine. They are blooming, they are nice and healthy looking. Nothing has found them yet. The Japanese beetles are kind of late this year as well in finding my plants, which I am thankful, and they are looking amazing there. I think that next year, if I have cannas in this spot right here, I will definitely keep them in containers, maybe a little bit higher than normal, because the cannas that I have in containers in other parts of my garden, they're doing definitely a lot better than the ones that I have in the ground. I also have coleus in the ground in this area right next to the cannas. I have chocolate mint and mighty mosaic coleus, and these two varieties right here are the ones that are handling the sun like a champ. They are doing amazing. They can handle the heat, they can handle the sun, so that's definitely something that I'm going to repeat next year. The tall raised bed that I got from gardeners last year is doing okay. It is definitely a challenge to have a raised bed there. It is leaning a little bit towards the wall, and I have been meaning to get that fixed, but it's not something that you can really tell unless you're really looking to see what's wrong with it. I think that next year I am going to try to find some sort of self-watering system so that I can put underneath that bed, because it is definitely a challenge to keep that nice and hydrated, especially during the really hot days. And with the temperatures that we have been getting, this bed is definitely one that needs a lot of attention. Most of the plants in this tall raised bed are doing really well, but the nasturtiums that I have here are definitely the ones that are struggling the most. I think the nasturtiums are going to definitely be fine for me, like I mentioned, in the ground, especially in the areas where I have lots of sun during the evening time. What I'm going to do here in the next couple of days is that I am going to remove all of the dead foliage of the plant. The plant still alive is actually trying to push new flowers and new growth, so I am going to try to keep it nice and clean, give it a little bit of fertilizer, and hopefully that will help. I have a combination of cannas, nasturtiums, lace flower, amidara, I think, but the ones that are still in the show for sure are my gorgeous Verbena bonariensis that I started with winter sowing. A lot of people mention that Verbena bonariensis reseeds like crazy, and I hope that that's the case for me for next year, because I would love to have my garden with a bunch of these little plants around. I hope that you guys enjoy this little quick walk around this flower bed that I have on the west side of the house. I am located in central Indiana, like I mentioned earlier, and thank you for being here.